Welcome to the 46th Writers Week at UCR. 46 years of incredible literary presence. We at UCR would like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Today, this meeting place is home to many Indigenous peoples from all over the world, including UCR faculty, students, and staff, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these homelands. Further, we offer acknowledgement to the Asian, Latino, and African American communities who have also built and tended to this city and its surroundings, oftentimes displaced and disenfranchised, despite their labor and commitment to the area. It is our third year online, and we couldn't be more thrilled than to offer captions and ASL interpreters throughout our sessions. And this year we have some on-campus, in-person events for those close enough to attend. We hope that you attend many events this week and spread the news that we are presenting these 33 writers free of charge to all. Pre-registration for virtual events is required, so spread the links as you spread the news. All of the books are available through UCR, Barnes & Noble, and Cellar Door Books online. Please support our authors by buying their books. And following each reading, please stick around for our live Q&A session. With no further ado, we welcome and greatly appreciate everyone here attending this 46th UCR Writers Week Festival. All of our writers presenting, all of our volunteer panel moderators, ASL presenters, and everyone who tunes into these recordings in the post-festival virtual continuum, and to everyone here attending now, welcome to the 46th UCR.
Hello, and as Allison says, welcome to everyone. We're glad that you're here with us today for a great session. A few little notes. By the way, I'm coming to you live from outside Creative Writing headquarters here on the UCR campus, and there's a little bit of construction noise that's kind of proof of what a dynamic campus this is. We wanted to give you a couple of helpful notes about if you've never used Crowdcast before. The Q&A segment will be run. I'll be running it, and I'll be reading your questions. If you put them not in the chat, but in the Q&A function, which is the little quotation bubble that has the question mark in it. If you click on that, put your question in, and I will send it over to our writers. And with that, thanks again for coming, and let's hear our three writers and their readings for today. It's the second icon from the top, as Melanie is saying. So talk to you in a little bit.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Writers Week 2023. My name is Ebony O'Brien. I'm a first-year student in the MFA program here, and we'll be introducing some of the authors today. In this other session, we have Ashanti Anderson, Ruben Quesada, and Hlava Ceballos. Next up, we have Ashanti Anderson, who is a Black queer disabled poet, screenwriter, and playwright. Their debut short poetry collection, Black Under, is the winner of the Spring 2020 Black River Chapman competition at Black Lawrence Press. Their poems have appeared in World Literature Today, Poetry Magazine, and elsewhere in print and on the web. Next up, we have Ruben Quesada, who is the editor of a hybrid collection, Latinx Poetics, Essays on the Art of Poetry, collecting dozens of Hispanic and Portuguese poets. He is the author of Revelations and Next Instinct Mammal Poems. He has served as poetry editor for AGNI, PA and Cake, and Pleiades, and as a poetry blogger for the Kenyon Review and Plowshares. His writing appears in the New York Times, Best American Poetry, American Poetry Review, Kirkus, and Harvard Review. He is a contributing editor at Tab Journal at Chapman University and teaches in the MFA program in creative writing at Antioch University-Los Angeles. Next up, we have Paul Hlava Ceballos. He is the author of Banana, winner of the 2021 AWP Donald Hall Prize for Poetry, chosen by Ilya Kaminsky. His collaborative chapbook, Banana, We Pilot the Blood, shares pages with Quentin Baker and Christina Sharp. He has received fellowships from Canto Mundo, Artist Trust, and the Poets House. His work has been published in Poetry Magazine, Pleiades, Poetry Northwest, and Bomb, among other journals and newspapers. He currently lives in Seattle, where he practices echocardiography, another word that's a bit of a mouthful, but thank you so much.
Hey, y'all. It's Ashanti Anderson. Today is Tuesday, December 20th, 2022. And I say that because in about a month, some news is going to come out, some really exciting news that I can't talk about right now. And then a month from then is when y'all are watching this. This is me from the past talking about the future. And then now we're in the future, but something has happened in the past. And that's really cool to me as a Monday Afrofuturist. So anyway, so yeah, let's get into it. I'm going to start with the end, actually. I'm going to start with the end. And it's called Resignation. This, my 2-week notice. I am tired with comparing my body to heavy things, of holding death like my grandmother's house. I erased my smile in another poem because someone said it made no sense. Understand, I am done writing about the Black girl emptied. I'm off to find a brown boy with his ghost still in him. Last week, I slipped and busted my mouth on asphalt. And if you want the blood, I will have for you my red, wet grin. So that's actually the last poem in my chapbook, Black Under. Shout out to myself, selfless promotion. I'm very proud of this one. Black Under, published by Black Lawrence Press. I am very happy to say that you can get my my chapbook pretty much anywhere. I would say order it directly from Black Lawrence Press, but also available through bookshop.org. And hopefully your local library as well. Please, please, please help me get my chapbook in your local library so that more people can read the poetry. I start with that because that's where I am now. That's where I am. I published this chapbook, and that was the poem that I ended it on. So I have to move forward from there. What happens, after you resign, and after I make this declaration that if you want the blood, I will have for you my red, wet grin. What does that look like? So I'll be reading a few poems from the chapbook that kind of embody where I see that going, where I see myself going. I'm very sensitive about my work, so I'm not sharing a ton of new work. But I would love to kind of talk y'all through some of my process and read y'all some poems that embody that work. So I am gonna read Another poem from the chapbook, Black Under. This one is called Bust of the Beheaded. The thing about Bust of the Beheaded is that it's based on this little tidbit that the human brain remains conscious several seconds after being decapitated from the body. So this poem is written in the perspective of Leroy, who was beheaded for running away to be with his lover. For you, I run past ivy, iron, hound's maw, and high water, find another man's field for where we might twine legs like snakes and bad suggestions. Let us sip skin salt till our lips feel like our bronzed heels and our steel toes have feelings in them again. Till my breath stinks of daffodil milk, till you have followed my constellation of limbs to horizon. This spine of mine has never held wicker basket nor whip, so it'd be easy for me to think every groan spiritual, every stroke the strike of pickaxe into good ground. I envy the ugly, how gravity nibbles the corners of your lips, unpaid labor tugging on your shoulders each sunrise. I do my best to imitate, bent and open like the shotgun loading, like the half-bidden moon, like misread scripture, like your arched and aching back, the grooves wide enough for my fingertips to ride your river of flesh. Cain was beheaded for participating in an uprising. To hold fire in my arms, I would give up the whole length of my neck to only kindle heat with the curl of my finger. You can have my pillowy face, my railroad of spine, just so I'd be able to hail fire on this plantation and even his children loose his horses with those tiny, fast-moving bits of light, aim at the sky and tear holes into their gods. I would tie my own throat in a bow. If only our oppressors would lick these flames, I will let them bring their own fire to my chest. I promise I will not feel a thing. I will already be warmed. My next poem is titled Slave Ship Habun. One day, a descendant of ours will go on a carnival cruise and still find time to think of us. She will hear the boom hiss of a house mix, but think it is impossible to be at peace without understanding it. She will stare down a wave, study its dance moves, note the direction it takes depends solely on the angle of her own glance. And she will wonder, is that the most profound thing she might learn about water? She will crawl under the bed in an attempt to imagine how we once felt, then curse at having too much space to move. At 6:30 in the morning, she will spill a bowl of grits on the liquor-soaked deck and eat the cold bleached cornmeal with her hands. She will ponder disease. She will envisage death. And she will speculate, the gulls must have stepped near us to pluck between planks for grain as they do now. But she thinks not of how we watch the birds circle overhead, bomb beak first into the ocean. Each in our own way, we began to imitate. A few of us induced feathers. I plucked a plume, made a quill. Crabs scratch backs, cloth still pale. One's back to another is a ladder home. Sister, pick which battle to win when you choose to lose the war. I tried staring at the sun once because I needed a metaphor. I held my head in a lake, breathed sediment, cut my wrists with tiny blades of sand. I think about suicide. Often I think of other people doing it. I think about women too strong to be my ancestors, stepping off a ship and into the ocean's font. That baptism, the salvation of discontinuity. I remember my heroes shoved their heads inside cannons to muffle the blow. Their oath, death is emancipation enforced. And over I repeat, I have to tell my baby. And the last one I will read from Black Under is Ode to Black Skin. You are dark as religion. Remember, God could not have named a modicum of light without you. You are plum, black currant, passion, fruit in another woman's garden. You are black as and as if by magic. Black not as sin, but a cave's jaw clamped shut by forgiveness. Color of closed wombs and bellies of ships. You, dark as not the tree trunk, but its every cleft. I chart each crescent moon rising above fingernail and rub together my thighs for want of you. I try to find you where the pages of books meet. You hang where men or piano keys segregate. When I miss you, I remember the hickey the sun left on the back of my neck. If I forget, I smoke blunts down to my fingertips and beg you to come on my lips. This is how I pray for you when I'm not pessimistic. I bow to your darkness like I kneel beside a child's bed, confessing its gospel. There's no monster here. So I have two more things I want to share with y'all. And this next poem is one of the first poems that I wrote at UCR. I worked on it a little bit, but totally the essence and everything is still there. And it just goes to show that you can be dealing with a certain theme on a recurring basis. You know, like this is something that's kind of stuck with me. And it's called Teach You to Float. Wade in the water that surrounds us, a testament that earth will keep on jiving without you, a covenant of God, a promise to propel you to lower water pressures as you sink. In the water, suffocation is like cotton. Those waves you question become your noose. Your own bones chain you to the thing you swim from. Wade in, but don't trust these waves for kindness. They own you and don't owe you a thing. When you feel there is nothing left to give this life, cry again. Your purpose is your pain. Trouble these waters. But don't ask me why God made waves that tear into you all too familiar. That which you consider an epilogue, let me remind you, is practice. And the last thing I have for y'all is actually a recipoem. So I live in New Orleans right now, and I am always around amazing food. And I love cooking it. I love eating it. I love sharing it. I am sharing with you all a recipe for good luck gumbo. And this is a green gumbo. So it's actually meatless. And I believe, even though the roux is made with flour, I believe you can substitute. I don't know. I have friends who tried it. I haven't tried it myself. So total disclaimer. But, you know, I really think that it's something that a lot of people can enjoy. So, yeah, so I want to share this with y'all. This is a little different than the poems, obviously, which were like very obviously rooted in the past. But this is still like gumbo is a family tradition in my family and a lot of families, you know, still very occupied with the past and lineage and history, in particular slavery, antebellum, and, you know, what was happening during that time. But bringing it back to the recipe, for me as someone who often doesn't eat meat, to have the opportunity to like bring this recipe poem to life through action and through cooking and eating is like, it's like a culmination of the past and the present. And, you know, that's really what I'm into. So I want to share this with y'all. I really do believe it makes a functional recipe because I cook by feeling. So this was actually really challenging to write. But I'm just going to give it to y'all. Enjoy. Good luck, gumbo. All talk of what goes in gumbo and what don't is just noise. I'm from Louisiana. We make do with what we got. This meatless gumbo is a staple for families fasting during Lent or any cooked with leftover trimmings they just hate to throw out. Besides, we all ought to be eating more greens, not just for the luck, but for the health. Blessed 6. You'll need 1/4 cup of vegetable oil, 1/4 cup of flour, 2 cups Holy Trinity, 1 tablespoon garlic, minced or crushed, 1 can fire roasted tomatoes, 8 cups vegetable broth, gumbo filet, optional, ground black or cayenne pepper to taste, 2 bay leaves, 1 pound okra chopped, and 2 bunches of fresh greens destemmed and chopped. When it comes to the greens, pick your favorite, dark and strong. Pour oil in a big pot. Set it on medium-high heat and wait a minute. When the oil is warm, sift in the flour and whisk. Stir the pot every time your roux starts to change color. Be patient and watchful. If it burns, you have to start over. Now, this next part is quick, so have everything ready. Once your roux is a rich, dark chocolate, stir in the garlic and Holy Trinity. When she hits your nose, throw in the can of tomatoes. Get the roux, veggies, and tomatoes to hugging, then pour in your broth. Stir in until fully diluted. Keep stirring as you add the bay leaves, pepper, and other seasonings. Filet powder gives you that gumbo taste. Turn down the heat and cover the pot. Once it simmers, add your greens and okra. Your gumbo will be ready to serve once the greens darken and begin to wilt. Try not to cook them too soft. Serve on a bed of white rice with a wedge of cornbread. If you put too much pepper, have it with potato salad instead. Good luck gumbo is delicious straight from the pot, but if you really want to smack your lips, cook this gumbo the day before and let the flavors spend the night together. Reheat on the stove and enjoy. I want to say thank you to everybody behind Writers Week. I want to say thank you to everybody listening to me right now. Thank you for your time, for your energy. Thank you for everybody who helps make my work possible. Thank y'all. Thank y'all. Thank y'all.
Hi, thank you for being here. Hello to those watching this online and in the future. I want to thank the directors of Writers Week, Tom Lutz and Allison Adele Hedge-Koch, and everyone at UCR who made this event happen. Thank you for supporting the release of my anthology by hosting me. I'm Ruben Quesada. I'm a poet and an editor. I teach poetry and literature at Antioch University-Los Angeles and at the UCLA Extension Writers Program. I was a student at UCR when I attended my very first Writers Week more than 20 years ago. It's an honor to be with you today. I want to tell you about my anthology and give you some context for its creation and purpose. The concept for this anthology project was planted in the late 1990s. I was an undergraduate studying poetry, and that year we had 2 visiting poets. They were the first poets who looked like my family, aunts, uncles, poets like Francisco Aragon, Rigoberto González, Carmen Jiménez, Valerie Martinez, Norma Cantu, Natalie Diaz, and Vicky Vertiz. These poets gave me the confidence to be a poet, a critic, and an activist. They have been a light in my world. Latinx poets, critics, editors, and activists who have been models of excellence. In the early 2000s, I read Dana Gioia's book, 20th Century American Poetics. The book contains an essay by Julia Alvarez titled, "So Much Depends." Alvarez describes how she discovered that William Carlos Williams was Puerto Rican. She explains how she was drawn to the language and rhythm of his poetry. She found this by connecting his use of syntax like her native Spanish. Alvarez admits that when she was younger, she was embarrassed by the ethnicity that rendered her colorful and an object of cultural performance. But her life experience was not in the literature she was taught. She sought stories that reflected experiences like her own. Additionally, Alvarez concludes by reminding us that by writing powerfully about Latino culture, we are forging a tradition and creating a literature that will widen and enrich the existing canon. She writes, "So much depends upon our feeling that we have a right and responsibility to do this." Before the 1980s, Alvarez found books by Latino men in bookstores and libraries, but she could not find any women among those early Latino writers. Knowing that someone from your heritage has contributed to your community matters, but there's more to us. Alvarez explains how she discovered her way into a bicultural, bilingual experience by reading Asian American writer Maxine Hong Kingston. Kingston wrote about the duality of experience and its pressure on being a Chinese American female. It's troubling to expect a writer to perform their cultural identity, and wearing it on your sleeve shouldn't be detrimental to the work. Of course, I felt obliged to include as many different perspectives and backgrounds, as many different connections to Latin America. As long as I can remember it, it has always been important to me to be inclusive. I wanted contributions to my anthology to include historically marginalized identities, and sometimes those identities exist beyond academic and cultural spaces. There's much to learn about the people of the Americas through Latinx literature. Physician and award-winning poet Rafael Campo shares in his essay, "Let's Call the Whole Thing Off," or The Possibilities of a Contemporary U.S. Latino Poetry, about an experience in 2007 when he wrote a 3,000-word book review on Latinx poetry. By this time, Campo's 4 books, 4 collections of poetry had been honored by the National Book Critics Circle, Lambda Literary Foundation, and the National Poetry Series. But the review was never accepted for publication. That same year, Rigoberto Gonzalez published an article titled "Those Pesky Minority Poets," where he traces resignations from the Poetry Society of America and the Academy of American Poetry. He admits, "I do agree that talent is colorblind, but I do know for a fact that I'm not, and neither is anyone else." Latinx writers are Black, Indigenous, Asian, white, and more. We do not find ourselves in every color in publishing. For most of the 20th century, we didn't find ourselves published anywhere. Giving people unlike you more visibility and inclusion creates a greater sense of belonging for everyone. When a publisher embraces the unknown, it offers readers a path to navigate new terrain. In the early 2000s, over 35 million, or 12%, Hispanic people were living in the US, according to the US Census and the Pew Research Organization. Today, more than 60 million, about 20% of the US population, live in the US. It matters to be seen and recognized. but any publication's visibility relies on marketing and promotion. That's a publishing area where more pressure must be applied to achieve equity. As Dana Gioia wrote in the introduction to his anthology, who wouldn't want to have all the possibilities of language available, especially the powerful enchantments of a poet's mind and process? In the past 20 years, Latinx literature has become more expansive and inclusive, and this anthology is a new addition to that canon. I began to write the proposal for this anthology in 2012. I'd secured most of all contributions by the end of 2017. I spent the next 2 years in contact with my editor at the University of New Mexico Press, who helped me copy edit, respond to, and communicate with contributors. I wish I could have published an essay by Jen Hofer, but I couldn't afford to pay for the royalties. It was an extraordinary manifesto. In the years of SARS-CoV, or the pandemic, between 2019 and 2021, I focused my time on completing and publishing the anthology. Editing this book was a juggling act for deeply painful reasons. This book exists because of the help I received from my editor, Elise McHugh, and poet Natalie Center-Zapico, they and many others who've put up with my shenanigans over the years. It was important to me to include academic and artistic philosophies. I'd spent the last decade as a student and teacher and wanted to learn from poets living in the world with me. Juan Felipe Herrera, Poet Laureate of the United States from 2015 to 2017, said it best in his foreword to the anthology. The mindful space of joyous creation, he writes, these, the warrior seekers, philosophers, survivors, archaeologists of the elusive and ungraspable self, that thing related to the other thing called identity, titled Latino Poetics or Latinx Aesthetics or the other tribe, as Valerie Martinez says in her essay, and Irene Lara Silva asks, American? Or is there such a thing? Reina J. Leon ponders. This anthology is one of a kind. Many anthologies have collected poems by Latinx poets and writers, but essays on the composition of language in this manner still need to be created. I often get asked to speak about poetics and my interpretation of its meaning. When I think of poetics, I turn to the word's meaning. Poetics deals with the techniques of poetry. We admire writing that employs narrative, rhythm, and sound, alone or in any combination. These elements make up the style, but we must interrogate a writer to know its nature. There's always an implied speaker in a poem, a form of rhetoric. Rhetoric is the art of using language effectively. In recent years, we've come to understand that forms of communication may not be honest or have our best interests in mind. That's rhetoric. I want to know what compels a speaker or writer to compose. The language of these writers is inseparable from Latin America. As I know myself more deeply, my understanding of language evolves. This book expands our understanding of writing and composition. Someone interested in people and the humanities will find something valuable in this book. A poet's tool is language. Sometimes we invent words like snark, mimsy, or churtle. The ancient word for a maker or an author can be traced back to Sanskrit as sinute. It means to arrange or collect or to put in an order. When I started putting the proposal for this book together, I turned to poets I knew to ask if they'd consider writing something in prose about their poetry. Not every poet drafts essays or long-form prose. And it would take volumes to include anything close to being representative of the diversity of the Latinx or Latin American diaspora. And that diversity will continue to evolve. This is the first time these contemporary voices have been collected in an anthology of essays on poetry with such breadth and scope. One unique feature of this anthology is the writing style and the form of these essays. Every essay is quite different, offering a glimpse into the minds of working poets in the early 21st century. The contributors to this anthology come from all walks of life. They are teachers, scholars, homemakers, laureates, physicians, and activists. These essays are for educators, writers, and lovers of poetry. In her essay, Peopleness, Ethnicity, and the Latinx Poem, Valerie Martinez remarks on the proliferation of Latinx poets. She writes, "Poetry is a phenomenon that reveals the complexity of our voices, styles, and perspectives." Martinez identifies that we live in a world that would be poorer without these complex identities. For poet Orlando Menes, the very tools poets use, words, kept him from fully realizing his potential. In his essay, he remembers, "One of my linguistic handicaps was having an inadequate vocabulary. So I took it upon myself to memorize new words from the dictionary and any other text, keeping a vocabulary journal." Words endowed with power through faith and science in composition permits us to realize more than we imagined we could understand. Poetry reminds us that our human experience has always been complicated. An essay in this anthology that resonates most with me is Blas Falconer's Puerto Rican Poetry and a State of Independence. The essay introduces readers to the relationship between Falconer and his grandmother and a poetic form called the plena, or the periodic canto. The poems in Yerba Buena, a collection by Puerto Rican activist Juan Antonio Corretejer, are a patriotic symbol in Puerto Rico. Like Julia Alvarez, here was a moment of discovery about a people's history and literature. Falconer documents the past, offering readers insight into social and historical subjects. New forms of writing highlight untold pasts of life in the United States. Recent poetry about language and history have expanded our imagination of historically resilient communities. Pulitzer Prize finalist Maider Vang's Yellow Rain, or National Book Award finalist Anthony Cody's Borderland Apocrypha, and this year's Banana by Paul Hlava Ceballos are great examples. Their techno poems are an interactive space for deep engagement by deconstructing sentences and historical information and incorporating technology to understand its meaning. Poetry can explain something about the world and mesmerize us. Poetry and the poet's relationship to language have always interested me. As a Spanish language heritage speaker, I've always had a circuitous relationship with language. I'm reminded of Robert Pinsky, whose prolific writing on poetry is fundamental to our understanding of American poetry. The situation of poetry is about words and their relationship to experience. In this book, Pinsky traces early American poetry to his timeline. The anthology tries to answer comparable questions from many perspectives. How can a poet hold an experience with language? And how do we communicate the human condition across culture, language, and time? We live in a time when people are reading and writing more than ever in the history of humanity. For writers and poets, who are the makers of worlds, the curators of history. Words carry the weight of calling the world to action, awakening its readers to the beauty and ugliness that surrounds us today. In the spring of 2006, Francisco Aragon published an anthology titled The Wind Shifts, New Latinx Poetry. It collects poetry from Latinx poets, and in an interview, Aragon acknowledges the importance of contemporary Latinx poets assimilating into American culture without losing sight of their Latinx identity by drawing on the social and political movements of the 1970s via code switching through an artful use of language to create a mosaic of emotion and story. Also, in 2013, an anthology called Angels of the Americlips, an anthology of new Latino writing, edited by Carmen Jimenez and John Chavez, was the first major mixed genre anthology focused on Latinx literature's innovative and experimental strand. Over the last decade, Latinx poets have created a written world of experiences. These contributions account for an increasingly pluralistic representation in contemporary writing. I turn to essays on the art of poetry to find the resiliency of poetic composition that will outlast us all. It's through the commonality of language and associative meaning that readers find a connection to a depicted experience. I recognize the importance of my Latinx predecessors, the influence that history and American literature have had on their work, their intersection with my history and our impact on the American literary tradition. The essays in my anthology are an examination. They further record what Latinx poets observe as the nature and function of poetry in their lives and in the fabric of American literature. These essays offer a deeper perspective on the richness and excellence of Latinx literature. It's an honor to have the University of New Mexico Press take on this project. UNM Press introduced me to poets like Paula Gunn Allen, Gabriela Mistral, and much more writers of Latin American and Indigenous heritage. And just as they'd done, I wanted to introduce poets of Latin American heritage to all types of readers. I hope you'll find a moment to pick up the anthology or ask your library to order it. Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, my name is Paul Hlava Ceballos, and I'm going to read a few poems from Banana. I'll just get into it, and I'll start with this poem, Nogales Entry, Elegy for Jose Antonio Elena Rodriguez, which contains some found text. There's 3 sections. Each section contains text. The first one from gunbroker.com, the second one from the Oxford English Dictionary, and then the third one from the Tucson Sentinel. Nogales Entry. 1. Salary. Sal. Re. Sal. Salt. Assault wage. Assault rifles for sale online. Real Border Patrol rifles used in action. Wages for sale for real assault. Real sales waged for salt. 2. A border agent has agency. Noun, plural, border agents. As in, boards of agents will border agents. Agent. A person who acts on behalf of. A person who acts on behalf of. To behalf of. 3. The boy's hands appeared to hold rocks. Appeared, not appear. Up here are no rocks to hold. Hold up. Hands appear. Hands. Hold the boy up. So I should say, I guess, before I read too much, that, there is some violence in these poems. And I hope that it's not just kind of excessive. I'm talking about certain histories in this book. And I wanted to kind of highlight and to honor some of the people that don't really get a place in a kind of American news or journalistic archive. This next one is a form, an Ecuadorian decima, which it's a form. It's syllabic. There's 8 syllables, more or less 4 beats per line. There's 44 lines. There's some amount of repetition of lines within the text. Yeah, it's a form, and it includes a couple of references to real people in here as well. Ecuadorian decima for the taken. A flower-blessed branch formed the air. Night pulls its hood over a head. Where did they put you, you who burned? Can I bend this branch back to you? A flower-blessed branch formed the air. Who watered this red offering? In this city, white pickets failed to stop squadrons of loaded guns storming Daniel Ramirez's house, where I have a work permit sounds like plastic zipped on father's wrists. A spat word planted in the ground grew. My friend, I worry for you. Who turned off the stove? Mopped boot prints. Night pulls its hood over a head. Violence can be a person moved to another state, despair, unexamined as profit is. If a man shoots a young woman, her name is Claudia Gomez, and the man had a bulletproof salary, new Jeep, and belief that she was armed with a birthplace or sunlight made flesh, where are we? Friends with hair like wildfire smoke, where did they put you? You who burned, you with mourning washed clean inside, where did they lock you? Can you eat what they provide? I hear the food is cost effective. Are they clean? Scrubbed warehouse prisons where shadows are scalpeled from hosed down bodies? Are children kept in the same cells with no phone calls? Who sings to them? Walls are nothing but feelings that what we exclude is what makes us whole. Is it not holy, the need to protect the people I love or could love? Where does my love end? I persist in this uncontained republic, rinsed in urgent dew. My friends, pursued since your first breaths, what songs call you? In what small ways can I bend this branch back to you? I thought I would open with a couple of the small poems from the other sections of this book and then end with a little bit of a larger bit from the title poem, Banana. This is more or less a kind of history of bananas in the Americas. It's all collage, so every line is taken from a separate source text, and every line includes the word bananas. Maybe I will just get into it. I have a little slideshow. The following background information has been on the labor situation in the banana zone. Adam and Eve clothed themselves in banana leaves, a swarthy savage about to pluck his evening meal from the ripened bunch of bananas, changing valueless jungles to valuable banana farms. On the 8th of December, 2017, Hernan Bedoya, another Afro-descendant leader from Choco, was heading home on horseback to his village. A new paramilitary group intercepted him on a bridge and shot him 14 times, killing him. Hernan had objected to the palm oil banana plantations and, note the arthroscopic banana knife. Knives. Dull knives are ragged cuts during dehanding of banana farmers who grow banana. Banana fruits. After deflowering fingers, cut banana workers with a banana knife, cutting at soil level and filling the base with kerosene. It has 10 hands, they will cut off one hand. There was a commercial aspect of banana workers, left sterile from handling, nematicides used in banana. Banana market opened, a well-developed banana spathe in banana-producing regions soared. Banana stalks rose through a deep tangle of limbs. As I mentioned, every line or piece of a line comes from a separate source text and includes the word banana. These texts go back to Carl Linnaeus's like one of the quote unquote first scientific books about bananas in the 1700s, agricultural manuals from the 1800s, 20th century declassified CIA documents. So here on the screen on the left-hand side, I have an example of a page of the poem, and on the right-hand side, an example of some of the endnotes that I typed up. There were 296 endnotes in total, and for some of them, I tried to give some background information, as you can see here. To develop new banana exports, the military junta, in a series of decrees, prepared ceremonial dishes of bananas and honored the cadaver and consuming the charred and crushed bones in a banana mush, ousted the president and installed military officers with ties to banana plantations. And do we want to ship bananas from Colombia? Need to keep this very confidential. People can get killed. On dead banana leaf or inflorescence tissues, they disperse by wind and water. As you can see, this first endnote, number 40, comes from CIA intelligence brief. The handwritten part here is a handwritten note from a meeting of Chiquita executives, and it was used in a court case in the Supreme Court in which they were found guilty of funding terrorists, the AUC. So a lot of this poem is obviously about banana labor and kind of corporate land grabs, but I wanted to include a section that was a little, I guess, more lyrical. In this piece of the poem, I took the idea of a collage and I wanted to distill it down to its essence, its like purest form. So if every line came from a separate source text and included the word banana, here, every line contains only two words, one word and the word banana. And each of those came from a separate source text. If you read it across the page, it reads one way. If you read it down the page, it reads a different way. So it'll be the last poem I'll read. I guess maybe this could be in the voice of a banana or a person, maybe like a banana laborer. Is banana, hunger banana, speckled banana, with banana, bullets banana, plant banana, the banana, first banana, tender banana, American banana, day banana. Is hunger speckled with bullets, plant the first tender American day. To be in and of American tender. To be a domesticated object, overripe as an empire. What ape among you bore the first desire? What manufactured nanostructure prevents grace blossoming? Rats gnaw fabrications like a president. Cue the canned applause. To be one of many, but small and bruised like me. Who will collect me when I am ready? More flowers, please. Okay. What wild flowers injure such sweet brown soil? Yellow flowers, purple flowers, red. How plump is the golden crown, the local children, healthy, grown, dead. Oh, endangered baby lost amidst lush edos, do not plummet under global fluctuations. Another and another lonely breath caresses slender petioles in the deepening country. Yellow flowers, purple flowers, red. Inspect my tragic skin, my corky scab, the nation-sized ripe spots, our tender hours. Scale can make a wound seem smaller. Okay, thank you very much.
Anderson, Ruben Quesada, and Paul Hlava Ceballos. We have a few questions for you to get us started, and I'm hoping the audience will add some more. I thought I would start by thanking you, Ruben, for that description and reading from your anthology. And I wanted to ask if you could speak a little bit about how your poetry is impacted by criticism, by theory, by the kind of essays that you have collected there, and then I'll ask both Paul and Ashanti how they react or don't to criticism.
Thank you for that question. I think that my interest in learning about the composition of poetry really allows me to focus on the origin of an idea or the impetus for a collection, and it allows me to think about my own work more deeply, about its content, about what responsibilities do I have to my work, and what responsibilities do I have to my readers. So there, for instance, there's a collection that I'm working on now that looks at my family's heritage in Costa Rica, Central America, and I'm working with a myth that started during early Spanish colonialism, early 1500s, and the myth is called La Cegua. Cegua is a word of Aztec word of Nahuatl, meaning woman. And the myth isn't necessarily particular to Costa Rica. There are many throughout Central America about a cursed woman, and it was invented to prevent racial mixing. And so this woman is a seemingly indigenous woman, and she lures men, these unsuspecting men, and then makes them disappear. And so, in thinking about origins and where my writing comes from, or other people's writing comes from, it moved me to turn and look at my own background and heritage. And so I'm taking this myth and modernizing it. I'm reinventing it in my own way, using a woman in the U.S. The poems are based in, they begin in the 1960s and follow her life through the mid 21st century. So I'm kind of writing about the future as well, but I'm focusing on the impact that 1950s expectations about gender and about work and a woman's place in society. I'm examining those ideas and how they've impacted or influenced our views of women in our contemporary society, and they're based on a little bit on this myth. They're based on my own family's experience, particularly my mother's experience. She immigrated to the U.S., and so my own personal background is finding its way into my work. But I don't think people would necessarily know that if I didn't write about it or talk about it. And so in the same way, I'm really interested in learning about other writers and where their ideas come from and how they go about putting their work together.
Mm-hmm. So it's a form of kind of being a little bit more conscious of your own process in some ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really important to get a sense of why is it that you're doing what you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ashanti, you're nodding yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say that exactly. Like for me, criticism is like I'll write something and then I won't, if I don't have the framework, like the theoretical framework that I'm working through and the questions that I'm trying to answer, then the work is inherently missing something. I can't fully um I can't fully access like the full range of my creativity if I don't know what's working behind the scenes of that piece or of that project. And criticism for me, when I read it and I engage with it, this is folks who have like the third eye and can really explain what is happening and why it's happening that way, and make what I'm doing make sense to me so that I can better align with inherently my values. So I totally agree in terms of it being like just a clarifying factor. At least that's what it is for me.
Great. And Paul? Oh, first, you seem to be muted, Paul. No. You're not muted on Crowdcast. It's your own microphone turned down, or? Okay. I think I'm sorry that I think that maybe can you hear me okay? Yeah. I think maybe the thing to do, Melanie always says the thing to do is to kind of close the browser window and come back in. And then I'll get back to you when you're back in.
Okay, sounds good. Can you hear me?
Nope, you're back.
Okay. I don't know what
You're
happened.
back.
Very nice.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
That's
glitch.
all right.
But yeah, those ideas really resonate with me, thinking about the kind of critical lens behind the work. I was really lucky to be able to collaborate with Christina Sharp as I was writing the banana poem. So I wasn't yet finished with it. And she's just such a big mind that I think she forced me to really think deeply about like what it was that was important to me to express, which made a big deal in terms of what I cut very specifically from the poem, which could have just gone on and on forever. And part of that was also thinking about culpability, I think, for me, as a writer, right? Somebody with like the power to speak. If I was writing about resource extraction, the extraction from the global north upon the global south, I'm no matter kind of what, racial or minority group I might belong to, like I still live in the United States. I could still go and get cheaper bananas anywhere. Mm-hmm. And then of course, also being a person of color, but, not being a Black person, not being indigenous who grew up on, a reservation. Like there's all of these kinds of privileges that I have. And I thought that, I guess what I've been thinking a lot about is how to kind of reflect back like onto me as a speaker and make sure that my voice isn't the most powerful voice, even though like I'm controlling the poem.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess the way that I was thinking about that was like through polyvocality. I was trying to include as many other speakers as possible. It was through kind of the writing and editing process with Christina Sharp and some of the other people that I decided to kind of just end on other people's quotes entirely. But
yeah. So that's a very specific example of a critical statement having an impact on the work, right?
Yes.
I mean, I because I'm the project I'm working on right now, I'm basically living in the 1920s, and the modernists all talked in various ways about the way that there are lots of forms of criticism. And there are lots of forms of writing, but among the forms of criticism, according to somebody like Ezra Pound, for instance, was new composition. That every new composition, in a way, is a form of criticism of the composition that's come before. It can be a criticism that's a celebration. It can be a criticism that's a rejection. It can be a criticism that's a elaboration. But that new writing itself is a kind of, and I found that very freeing for myself. And kind of found it like changing the way I thought about the various different kinds of writing that I do, and made me feel like they're all kind of the same somehow. Does that make sense?
And it gives you a certain amount of like freedom or ability to cut your own work, the things that are more important to you, at least is the feeling that I had throughout that process too.
And it looked like you were going to say something about that as well, Ruben.
Well, I wanted to ask questions of the other writers.
Yeah, do it.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, when Ashanti, I'm really excited. To have heard you read and to hear your introduction. I've been interested in this idea that that's been around for a bit amount of time called techno poetry, and I mentioned Paul's work in my talk. Because I would frame Paul's work as a techno poem or techno poetry, and that's really where you take elements of nature, bananas most resonant in Paul's work, and you enmesh that. You try to put it together with some form of technology. And if you look at Paul's work, you have to go to his website to get like all this information. Like Paul cites almost 300 sources in that middle section of his book. Like I've spent so much time with your book, Paul. It's it's incredible. But Ashanti, you started talking your talk about Afrofuturism, and that's something that I don't get to hear a lot about, and I wonder if you might be able to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. Where do I start? Okay, so just as like a introduction, and because I'm not an expert myself, but I know what I ascribe to, so I'll share that, and I'll share that with the caveat that, like many other things in the world, Afrofuturism is definitely a spectrum. So when I mentioned that I'm on the mundane Afrofuturist side of things, it's definitely being, for me, how I interpret it is being concerned with the future as realistically, but as full of liberation as you possibly can. So, with an eye towards liberation, with an eye towards an end of what does a world without capitalism look like? What does a world without racism look like? Not because we think that these things are going to magically disappear, but how can we begin to act and move in ways that are in line with the futures that we want to see, in order to like save what we have left of the world. And that's kind of how I try to engage with Afrofuturism personally. And in my work, you know, definitely leaning, you know, I'm working towards being an eco poet. I really am, but I haven't made the leap yet to where I feel like I can claim that title for myself, but definitely moving towards, you know, really being with nature because, you know, like so much sci-fi stuff is like, there are no trees. That's terrifying to me, you know, like I don't want a future with no nature, you know. So that's also a part of like having that mindset and like how do I bring forth the world that I want to see, and you know, doing that and expressing that in the work is definitely, I think, one of the most effective ways that I can do that, you know, to share that with others, to share, you know, these values and how I feel. But definitely just, yeah, when I think of Afrofuturism, I mean, it ranges. Like I've heard, you know, I heard, I think it was Kiesi Layman who said, like the Cosby Show is Afrofuturist because it's uh, two highly successful Black people. It's this like very successful, well-off Black family, and you never hear them complain about white people. That's Afrofuturism, you know. So when I think about, that's what I think when I think about Afrofuturism. Like, really, what are the possibilities based on history, right? Like based on what we've been through, what has happened, what is happening, what is the most realistic but most liberated way forward? And that's how I conceptualize Afrofuturism. So I hope that helps.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Other questions you have for each other?
I'm interested personally in knowing where can I get started with this. Like y'all have such an attention to language that I try to have, but I don't have. I feel like there's also a lot of like reading that y'all are doing, right? And a lot of other texts that y'all are bringing in. And, you know, I'm interested in a craft perspective, like what has been like really informative text for y'all.
Yeah, Ruben, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts on that as somebody who's spent so much time reading these, you know, other texts. How have those affected you in your writing?
Well, you know, there's one essay, and as I was listening to both of you read, like I listened for like assonance, as particularly, right? It's like the repetition of vowel sounds, and so like Ashanti, your work is full of vowels. Like I love it. Like it's beautiful, and so I, you know, and my attention to these elements, Paul, come from there's this essay that I keep coming back to by Gregory Orr called "The Four Temperaments and the Forms of Poetry." It was published by American Poetry Review in 1989, and I just have never gotten out of my head. And it talks about like these four temperaments: story, structure, music, and imagination. And so whenever I teach like an introductory writing course, I like to use that essay because it gives students like a guide to be able to talk about poetry using those four temperaments. And so I think that's a really good starting point. And that was a really good starting point for me in thinking about how to like dissect a poem. So that's I would say that's a good starting point.
And I'm afraid that's going to be have to be our last word because we've run out of time. Even though I feel like the conversation's just getting really interesting, so we'll have to have you all come back next year and continue it. Our next session is going to start very soon, and among the readers there is Aize Jama Everett, who is an Afrofuturist and a quite excellent one, as well as Allison Hedgecoke and Jan Beatty. I want to thank you, Ruben, thank you, Paul, thank you, Ashanti, for this great set of readings. Paul, we will fix the images for the tape when we put it back up. We'll put it back up, and it'll be evergreen on the Writers Week site. And I want to thank all of our sponsors, all of the people, especially Melanie Romero, who's been made everything happen this week, and thank you, Cassidy, for your sign interpretation. And here you see all of our sponsors up on the board. Thanks to everyone who's made this week possible. And we'll see you all soon, I hope.